Welcome back, guys. Today I'm just going to show you on this herringbone wall here how I do these herringbone cuts up the side, and this will apply to cuts up the top. It's the exact same thing and it's actually pretty straightforward, a lot more easier than it looks. So I've got a lot of videos on herringbone, but probably not gone too much into detail on the cutting. And I'll put a little B-roll clip in here, but just to show you how I set this herringbone out as well. Again, it's featured in my other videos, but I've got the laser running centered actually between this mirror cabinet on this one, and the height is roughly across there, and you would just mark the center point of the tile, use your set square, I can show you here, mark a line that way and ditto the other way, so you basically have a point and just line that up with the lines. But I'll put a bit of B-roll in to show you how I do that, but that would get you centered with herringbone top, bottom, left and right every time. But I'll put the camera up here and I'll just show you how I'd go about marking these, and like I say, it's a lot easier than you would think. Okay, so there's a few ways you can get this measurement. You could use a tape measure and whatsoever, but I'm going to do it with the tile as I normally work with them in my hand. So let's just put an arrow to which way the tile is going. So I would flip the tile around and I'd go for this point here. I'd keep it in line where it needs to be, and I'd just allow for the joint and a bit of play there. This wall's tiled, so I can mark it a little bit looser. But as long as you're in line with that and you've allowed for your tile joint, and then once you flip the tile back round, this is which way it would be going, and you can mark across there, which is where your angle would be going. Now, I'm going to show you how to cut these on a tile cutter, but if you wanted to use an angle grinder, if you didn't have a tile cutter, you just put a speed square on that mark and draw through it, and you just angle grind through there, and that's your cut. So I'll take you over to the tile cutter and I'll show you how I batch cut them and mark them. Now, the only thing to just check, if you want to cut them all the same, is just make sure your wall is reasonably level. This one's a little bit out, but not the worst, so again, I'll allow for that. I'll just give myself a little bit more play, so if it's got a belly in it or whatsoever. As I say, this is tiled anyway, so it's all covered. So let's go over to the cutter. Right, cool. So say you've marked your tile out. The great thing with this cutter, it's a Sigma tile cutter, cuts porcelain very well. Ceramic, like which this is like butter. You can move the bar to 45 degrees, so you lock it in there. And this is really helpful for herringbone. And you just put your tile in, line your mark up, or line if you've drawn one with the midpoint here, and then what you can do is just mark the bar, and this will allow us to batch cut. So through that, and there we go, that's the piece we want. So say we want to cut another tile, we can just bring it in, line it up with our two marks there, scribe through, and it cuts easy as that, and you'll get a perfect cut with a Sigma cutter as well. So this makes cutting for herringbone very easy. Like I say, if you didn't have a Sigma cutter or a tile cutter that turns on 45 degrees, just mark it with the speed square and angle grind through it. You'll get a similar result, but this is just a lot quicker, and like I say, you can just batch cut very quickly. So let's just show you these cuts. Okay, so like I said, I gave it a little bit of play. So in theory, there we go, this goes in like this, and then our next one goes in like this, and so on. So you can cut them all the same. This wall, like I say, I've given it a bit of play, so there'd be the whole same cut the whole way down the wall. So you could just run multiple of them off, and that would go the whole way up the wall as well. So all the way up here above the mirror, it would be the same cut going the whole way up. So you could, again, just check your wall and allow yourself enough play, but you know, for this you could run 20 off or whatever, and just speeds the whole process up of tiling herringbone. I'll just put in a little bit of B-roll here on how I cut around things like this as well. I mean, again, they're a lot more straightforward than they look. You normally get a bit of play, you can see with the rings that go on here, what the hole's like around there, and so you don't have to be massively accurate, but just always check these with your plans. But I'll add a bit of B-roll now to show you how I cut around pipes and stuff like that as well. So for this kind of cut here, which is basically a circle, that's a 35mm hole. So I'll just mark this as any other hole really. It doesn't make any difference the fact that it's herringbone. So again, I'd put it against it and leave a bit of play, so got quite a bit of flange around it. So that'll be for that height. This bit, I'll turn the tile this way, and again mark like that. Then we want this side, so then I'll put the tile this way. Then we got our box forming. For the bottom here, I would again leave a joint, leave a bit of play going through there, and it's about there. So now we can create a box around it for our hole cutter. And we just take the speed square there to make the box through that line there, say through that line there. And then that somewhere around there. Again, it doesn't need to be massively accurate. And there we go, that's our box. And then various different ways of doing this, but I'd usually just take the hole cutter, if you like, put it on there to show you, and then you can just draw around it as a guide. And you can now start to see, just roughly draw around that for a moment, what the hole, yeah, it's better drawing around things I see, but yeah, you can roughly start to see where the hole will be. So yeah, I'll put that on there properly and draw around it, cut the hole out, and that's it. And then let's just give it a test. It shouldn't be too far off, and yeah, there we go. So that's absolutely fine. Got massive rings on it, so that's how I do that. So yeah, especially if you have like a Sigma tile cutter like we just showed you there, it just speeds the whole process up for cutting herringbone. It makes, say, these would be the exact same method for the ceiling, the floor, and whatsoever. So you can just worry about getting your full tiles in, run your cuts off. It just speeds the whole process up a bit. So I'm going to carry on with this one now. I'll link a couple of videos in the description about setting out in a bit more detail, but like I say, everything should be covered in them, but I just wanted to show you the cutting here. So I'll say take care guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.